We all know the rule, right? Your friend's enemy is your enemy. It's simple, it's clear. But what if your friend, your brother, is secretly doing billions of dollars in business with that very enemy? What if the same nations that loudly condemn Israel at the United Nations are quietly signing massive trade deals, selling them oil and buying their weapons? And what if, while we all chant for Palestine, our so-called brotherly governments are helping fund the very war machine that's killing Palestinians? This is about a shocking betrayal across the Muslim world, from the United Arab Emirates and Turkey to Azerbaijan and Saudi Arabia, the very countries that call themselves leaders of the Muslim Ummah. Why are Muslim nations that normalized relations with Israel through the Abraham Accords still deepening their economic ties, even as Gaza burns? Why is Turkey, which once stormed out of international forums condemning Israel, now quietly pumping Caspian oil to Israeli refineries? And why are governments, like Pakistan's, clinging to symbolic gestures while their allies profit from the occupation? We're told it's realpolitik, that national interest comes before morality. But when does realpolitik become complicity? As the death toll in Gaza surpasses 60,000, mostly women and children, and the world's first famine in decades unfolds under Israeli bombs, we have to ask, are Muslim governments truly powerless, or are they choosing profit over principle? This is the story of how Palestine was sold out, not just by Western powers, but by its own brothers. And it's time we held them accountable. Let's expose the hypocrisy, let's follow the money, and let's ask the question no leader wants to answer. Who really benefits from this betrayal? This is not just a video, this is an intervention. The Abraham Accords and a new regional order.
The Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords in the Abraham Accords.
To understand why this question even arises, we need to look at the broader geopolitical shifts that have reshaped the Middle East. On September 15, 2020, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain joined Israel at the White House to sign the Abraham Accords, a landmark set of agreements that normalized diplomatic relations between Israel and several Arab countries. The deal later paved the way for Morocco to renew ties with Israel. It unlocked direct flights, people-to-people exchanges, and business partnerships that have fueled investment and growth across the region. This was the first time in a generation that Arab states openly recognized Israel. Former US President Donald Trump saw the accords as a way to withdraw the United States from endless Middle Eastern conflicts while still securing Israel's place in the region.
Also opened the door for Muslims around the world to visit the historic sites in Israel.
For the signatories, the accords were about diversifying their economies, gaining advanced technology, and countering Iran's regional ambitions. Iran, already at odds with both Israel and many Gulf states, became a unifying threat. The accords also sent a clear message to Palestinians. Regional priorities were shifting, and the old consensus of isolating Israel was eroding. Pakistan's lonely stance. Against this backdrop, Pakistan's refusal to recognize Israel has increasingly looked out of step. Until very recently, Pakistan was also the only UN member state that withheld recognition of Armenia, citing solidarity with Azerbaijan over Nagorno-Karabakh and drawing parallels with its own dispute over Kashmir. That changed in August 2025, when Islamabad signaled readiness to establish diplomatic ties with Yerevan. Pakistani officials admitted there was no longer any reason to withhold recognition after a US-brokered peace agreement normalized Armenia-Azerbaijan relations. The shift shows how pragmatism can override decades of ideological posturing. Azerbaijan's quiet alliance with Israel. If Pakistan's policy was meant to stand with Baku, it did not go both ways. Since the early 1990s, Azerbaijan and Israel have built a quiet but robust partnership. For a decade leading up to the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh war, Israel accounted for up to 70% of Azerbaijan's imports of advanced weaponry. In return, Azerbaijan became Israel's main supplier of oil, providing up to 40% of its imported crude. These flows run through the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan (BTC) pipeline, a 1,768-kilometer conduit that carries crude from the Caspian Sea across Georgia to Turkey's Mediterranean coast. From Turkey's Ceyhan terminal, tankers ferry the oil to Israel's refineries. During the Gaza war, Baku briefly stopped listing Israel as a destination in its customs data, but Israeli sources reported that shipments continued via third-country traders. Turkish pressure to halt sales stemmed from the fact that the BTC line runs through its territory. Azerbaijan did not just buy drones and missiles. Israeli companies provided surveillance systems, electronic warfare gear, and precision loitering munitions like the Harop. These weapons gave Azerbaijan a decisive edge in the 2020 and 2023 Karabakh wars. In return, Israeli intelligence gained access to Azerbaijan's long border with Iran. Reports from think tanks describe how Israeli operatives used Azeri territory as a listening post to monitor Iranian missile tests and to stage covert operations. Such cooperation, though rarely acknowledged publicly, underscores how deeply Baku is entangled with Tel Aviv. Ankara's roller coaster relationship with Israel. Turkey offers another study in complexity. It became the first Muslim-majority state to recognize Israel in 1949, but relations have seesawed ever since. In January 2009, during a World Economic Forum panel on Israel's assault on Gaza, Turkey's then Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan stormed off stage after being cut off while criticizing Israeli President Shimon Peres. "I don't think I will come back to Davos because you don't let me speak," he said, later accusing Peres of knowing very well how to kill children.
I want to ask you to defer to our host. To our host.
Benim için de bundan böyle Davos bitmiştir. Daha Davos'a gelmem.
Relations collapsed again in May 2010 when Israeli commandos boarded the Mavi Marmara, a Turkish-flagged aid ship bound for Gaza, and killed 9 Turkish activists. Turkey expelled the Israeli ambassador and froze military cooperation. Diplomatic ties remained strained until March 2013 when US President Barack Obama brokered a phone call in which Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu formally apologized for the deaths and agreed to pay compensation to the victims' families. Erdogan hailed the apology as a sign of Turkey's growing regional clout and said the normalization of relations would depend on 3 conditions: an apology, compensation, and easing of the Gaza blockade. Despite political tensions, trade continued to surge. Bilateral commerce climbed from about $500 million in 2002 to roughly $8 billion by 2023. And oil shipments through the BTC pipeline to Israel persisted. Turkish tankers leaving Ceyhan often switched off their transponders to avoid public scrutiny, and officials stopped publishing detailed export statistics. Climate activist Greta Thunberg and Turkish opposition MPs have accused Ankara of hypocrisy, condemning Israel's actions in Gaza while continuing to profit from oil exports. The Turkish government insists that it must honor contractual obligations. Pakistan and Azerbaijan's military bonanza. While Ankara and Baku nurtured ties with Israel, they also deepened defense cooperation with Pakistan. In June 2025, Islamabad signed a $4.6 billion contract to supply 40 JF-17 Block 3 fighter jets to Azerbaijan, accompanied by a $2 billion investment package. The deal, the largest defense export in Pakistan's history, expands an earlier order of 16 aircraft and will give Baku advanced avionics, AESA radar, and compatibility with long-range Chinese missiles. Pakistani officials hailed the sale as proof that the country's defense industry can compete globally. Azerbaijan sees it as part of a broader modernization of its air force following its wars with Armenia. Double standards and difficult questions. Put all of this together and a contradictory picture emerges. Pakistan stands firm in rejecting Israel, yet its closest allies sell Israel oil and buy its weapons. Turkey decries Israeli aggression, yet continues to earn transit fees from the BTC pipeline and exports goods worth billions of dollars. Azerbaijan thanks Pakistan for diplomatic support, yet hosts listening posts that feed Israeli intelligence on Iran. Meanwhile, Islamabad itself is contemplating recognizing Armenia to gain access to Eurasian trade corridors. Gulf contradictions. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar. The uncomfortable questions don't end with Turkey and Azerbaijan. A look at our other brother countries shows the same pattern of public outrage married to private cooperation. Saudi Arabia loudly paused its push to normalize relations with Israel after the Gaza war, and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman told Washington that recognition would depend on Israel taking concrete steps toward a Palestinian state. Yet Riyadh hasn't abandoned its strategic ambitions. Instead of the full-blown mutual defense treaty it once sought, the kingdom is negotiating a more modest security pact that would expand joint drills, promote Saudi investment in US drone defense technologies, and open the door to larger weapons sales. The head of the Gulf Research Institute summarized it bluntly. Saudi Arabia will get a deal that allows more military cooperation and sales of US weapons, but not the binding treaty it initially wanted. In other words, the kingdom is shelving political conditions while still banking on the military and economic benefits. The United Arab Emirates provides an even starker example of compartmentalization. After signing the Abraham Accords in 2020, the UAE's trade with Israel exploded, growing 17% in 2023 to $2.95 billion. According to Israel's Central Bureau of Statistics, bilateral commerce remained 7% higher in the first quarter of 2024 despite anger across the Arab world over Israel's assault on Gaza. Abu Dhabi quietly urged Israeli firms to keep new deals out of the headlines and began scrubbing customs data to avoid showing Israel as the final destination. There have been no public demonstrations in the UAE, though black and white keffiyehs are now common on Dubai streets. Even as more than 50,000 Palestinians lay dead and the United Nations warned of mass starvation, oil and technology continued to flow. Qatar poses a different sort of dilemma. The Gulf state hosts Hamas's political bureau and has mediated several ceasefire proposals. Yet Israeli officials have accused Doha of playing both sides and demanded it choose between civilization and Hamas. Qatar rejected those statements as inflammatory, highlighting the suffocating blockade, systematic starvation, denial of medicine and shelter in Gaza. The spat underscores how even mediators are caught between rhetoric and reality. Qatar bankrolls redevelopment projects in Gaza and pledges support for Palestinians, yet maintains open channels with Washington and has used its wealth to win influence across the region. For many observers, the question is not whether Doha favors Hamas or Israel, but how long it can straddle both roles. Taken together, these examples reveal a broader pattern. Saudi Arabia delays formal recognition yet pursues a lucrative security pact. The UAE condemns the violence in Gaza while quietly maintaining a booming trade relationship. Qatar positions itself as mediator even as it faces accusations of duplicity. All three have signaled solidarity with Palestinians, but stop short of using their considerable leverage to halt the slaughter. When one contrasts these stances with the death toll in Gaza, now estimated at over 60,000, and the looming famine, the dissonance is hard to ignore. If these states truly believe in Muslim unity, why are they unwilling to sacrifice economic deals or diplomatic ambitions to save Palestinian lives? The answer may lie in the same realpolitik calculus that binds Turkey and Azerbaijan to Israel. In the end, interests trump ideals.